Hi, this is Matthias from mamoworld.com and welcome to the third part of our class here about creating a project startup script with automation blocks. So we create a tool which helps you to automate your workflow whenever you need to start a new project. And in the first episodes, we already created here a little pop-up dialog. So the first line just shows the user an input which asks, please enter a project name. And then we create a new project. We create some bins here in our project panel. We save the project file and we create some folders on our hard drive. So in particular, we create here a folder with the same name that the user entered here as a project name. And then we create subfolders AE, final results and footage, and also save our project here. Now what we want to do today is to extend the script such that it also copies some footage actually to the footage folder here. And what I want to do is when I connect my camera to my system, it mounts this drive no name here in my case. And I want to do it such that when this drive is mounted, it copies all the images from this drive. So this means we learn how to copy files and we also learn some logic. So we're going to look at the blocks here in this logic category because we need to understand how to do something only under certain conditions. So like only when the drive is mounted in this case. Okay, so but let's first start with actually copying the files. So we go here to the files category where we find a copy file or a folder block. And you can see that here in the first line, you can decide what is copied and here where it should be copied. And by default, you see here it's a file input. Yeah, and this means if I click here, it would give me an open file dialog to choose a particular single file. But we want to copy an entire folder. So what we need to do therefore is go to the files category and replace such a file input here by a folder input. We just drag it here on top. And now we can conveniently just choose here in our drive no name. Actually, we want this DCIM folder. Inside of this, we've got these kinds of folders with all the images. So we want to copy the entire DCIM folder in this case. Open. And again, note that all that this block here actually does is creating here such a text. Yeah, so you could also just enter this text manually and paste it here if you want, but it's definitely cleaner to use a folder picker block here in this case. So now we need to decide where we want to copy this. And actually in this previous block, we created our footage folder. Yeah, we said in the project folder, we want to have a subfolder footage. So we can just duplicate this because this is actually the file path or the folder path that we need, and we just drag it on top. So this means now the entire contents of the DCIM folder is copied to the footage folder. Let's check these options. It says if target folder does not exist, create it. We are pretty sure that it exists because we create it here, so it really doesn't matter. And if a file exists, we replace it with a new file. Okay, this sounds reasonable. So let's test how this script is working. We run it and say, my cool project, and our bins have been created. The script finished successfully, says done here. And in our projects folder, we now have the my cool project folder with the subfolders. And in the footage folder, indeed, we have our 111 Panna folder with all our images here. Cool. Next, we want to understand how to do this only under certain conditions. And for this, we need logic blocks. So in particular, we need this if block here. And this if block works such that here you can put a condition only if something is the case, do something else. And what we want to do is copying a file. And we drag this in here. And now when the tool here executes all these blocks step by step, at this point, it first checks a condition, and only if the condition is true, it executes this block, and otherwise it skips the block. Yeah, and if we take a look at the logic category, the simplest thing that we could do is use here such a checkbox. And this means now with the checkbox being enabled, which corresponds to yes, this condition is satisfied, this would be executed. And if I disable the checkbox, it would not be executed. Yeah, but now the interesting thing is we can put here more exciting things. By the way, if you're a programmer, you might wonder what is the difference between this checkbox and this true. So you could also put here true or false. And the answer is both of them are identical. It's just a different visual representation of the same thing. This here is what programmers are used to. Yeah, and the checkbox is what normal users are more used to. But you can also put here conditions like an equality check. Yeah. So for example, you can say, let's go into the math category to get some numbers, for example. You can say if 6 is equal to, and let's make it even a bit more interesting, if 6 is equal to 3 plus 3, now you could wonder, well, is this the case or not? Is 6 the same as 3 plus 3? Yes, of course it is. So this will be executed. And if I put here a 2, then it will not be executed. Yeah, and of course, these are just very basic mathematical examples that don't really make sense. In reality, you rather have conditions here like, if the width of my composition is 1920 pixels, do this or that or so. Or now here in this particular example, we want to check if a particular folder is present on my system, right? So we need to find blocks that checks if a particular folder is present. So we go to the files category again. And what can we see here? A file exists block. And you can see that file here is actually a drop down. So let's hope that there's also a folder. Yes, amazing. You can check if under a given path, a file or a folder exists. So the folder that we need is exactly this one here. So we duplicate it and drag it here. And now we can put this here. So now only if this particular folder exists, this block will be executed. Okay? Now we can make it even more interesting and say, if this is not the case, we want some kind of warning message. Yeah? So what we need to do for this is we click here to change the shape of this if block, and it allows to add either more alternative conditions or just an else. And this is what we need here. Else. And now you can see that here is now a second position where we can insert additional blocks. And now the block works such that first it checks this condition. Does this folder actually exist? If so, it executes whatever you have here. And if it's not the case, if the drive is currently not mounted, if this folder does not exist, then it executes whatever we put here. So we can go to our user interface and put here a little alert message, for example, and say, could not copy any footage. Camera is not connected. Now let's check if this is working. We run our script. It asks for a new project. Say my test project. And it is done. And it created, hopefully here, the my test project and copied all my footage. And now let's disconnect my drive here. I unmount it. And now let's run the tool again. Another cool project. And now it says, could not copy any footage, camera is not connected. Okay, exactly as we expected. So in this case, this block was not executed, but this block was executed instead. Okay, one last remark about those logic values here. You can see that they look different. Yeah, while normal blocks here have these round endings, these here have these sharp corners at the left and the right edge. And this always indicates that something is a logic block. And you have this in many situations. Let's say, for example, we go here to a layer and want to get from a layer a particular attribute. Then the attribute 3D layer, so the test is a particular layer, a 3D layer, has this shape. Yeah, it indicates this is a logic value. The question is this a 3D layer is yes or no. It's a logic value. You can use it in conditions. And if I say instead, from the layer, I don't want to know if it's a 3D layer, but I want to know its blending mode, then it turns into a round shape, well, which indicates, okay, this attribute blending mode is not a yes or no thing that you can put in a condition, but this is rather a text, for example. There are some exceptions to this rule, and this is variables. Variables don't really know what they store. Yeah, here in this case, all the variables we created had text values. We stored text values in the variable, but in a variable you can really store anything. You can store logic values, whatever you want, numbers, but they will always keep their rounded shape because a program really does not understand or does not know what you store in them. Nevertheless, you can put those variables then as a condition into such an if statement, for example. Yes, so don't be afraid to try to also put blocks with a rounded shape into such a logic statement block input. Okay, that's it for today. Next time we extend our tool such that it does not only copy the files to the project folder, but it also imports it here in our After Effects project. And for this, we're going to use a very cool block that syncs folders on your hard drive with a bin here in your project. So I hope you enjoyed this class, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next one.